Welcome back to Out with the New, In with the Old. Today, I thought we'd talk about used vehicles that are cheap to own. And one of the reasons I want to talk about these is because I think in 20 years, we're going to have trouble finding used vehicles that are cheap to own. Um, Cars are getting so complicated now and so full of technology and require so much dealer activation that I think it will be impossible to find a new car that's cheap to own anymore, unless you get a 40-year-old car. And that's 20 years from now. But I can talk about this. I bought a brand new 2023 Dodge Scat Pack and Dodge Challenger, 6-speed manual. And we kind of bought it just because we thought it'd be fun to have a car like that. The fun began the day I bought it. We were at the dealer and we couldn't take it because it didn't show enough on the battery, and they weren't allowed to let the car go with less than 60%. So the day we bought it, they had to put a new battery in it, which of course they took care of. And I guess it was a special Chrysler battery. He showed me what it would have cost, $660. I'm like, oh, that's neat. Anyway, so on to buying it. We take delivery, go through the rigmarole at the dealership, and on the way home, I turn on the performance pages, which tells you all about the performance of the car and what you can set up on it, and blah blah blah. Well, it didn't come on. It came on when we tested it, but it didn't come on. And so now we turn around and go back to the dealer. Oh, we've seen this happen once before. Okay, so they have it for 30, 40 minutes. Okay, it's working now. Okay, well, that's nice. So far, two things, and we haven't even got home with it yet. Then, roughly 7, 8 days later, the controls that control how to turn on that screen stopped working. The screen would come on, but we had no control over it, and which meant operating the heating and air. You couldn't do that 100%. You could kind of turn some stuff on, but not all of it. So on to the dealer it went again, which they fixed relatively quick. First we had to go in, they diagnosed it, and I was thinking there was probably a connection loose in the back, and even the guy in there said that, but he goes, oh no, we're not, this car's brand new, we're just going to put a whole new control unit. Okay, And they did in roughly 45 minutes, and it worked. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's fixed. Anyway, so, I'm already getting a feeling like this car is going to be nothing but a headache. Yeah, it's a lot of fun to drive. It's got tons of power, pushes you in the seat real hard. It's real nice. Rides nice. Handles nice. And I get around to doing the first oil change, and just getting the thing jacked up is kind of a act of Congress because it's so low. You got to jack up one side, get it on jack stand, jack up the other side, get it on jack stand, And I'm like, yeah, nothing on this car is simple or easy. And okay, it's a performance car. So you give it a little leeway on that. And then I look at the wheels and the tires and the suspension and the brakes. It's got gigantic brakes. And I'm thinking to myself, when it comes time to do anything on this car, it's going to cost a lot. But I said, well, we'll ride it out through the warranty maybe. And we didn't use it much because we didn't want to get it dirty. You know, it's kind of like if it was raining out, it stayed in the garage, and that kind of thing. Anyway, so it's definitely not a car that's going to be cheap to own. And it's not fun to pick that car because it's a performance car. But you look at any new car now, and it has all that technological stuff. And some of it is worse than what was on that car. That car, you could still operate some of the things without the screen. A lot of cars you can't. And most cars have special this and special that, even the cheap ones. Most of the cheap ones have turbochargers. All this stuff that in 20 years, when it's an old used car, it's probably going to come close to totaling it if anything has to be repaired. So I decided to make a list of what I think are the 20 best, cheapest cars to own. And there's a common denominator on this. I'll say F-150s, Panther platform Fords, which are Ford Crown Vics, Marquis, Lincoln Town Cars. With the F-150s, you got simplicity for the most part. I think you got certain years you don't want to get messed with just because they had severe engineering problems. But I think from 2004 and back, you got really simple vehicles to work on, simple to operate, simple to get parts, cheap to get parts for, and durable. The same thing with the Panther platform. Basically just a good overall, simple, cheap to fix, a good platform. Then you got the 3.8 General Motors vehicles, your Olds 98s, your Buick Park Avenues and LeSabres, your Pontiac Bonnevilles, some Grand Prix, some Chevy Monte Carlo SSs had the 3.8 in them. Some other, I think, Impalas of certain years had the 3.8. An engine that's simple. It's a push rod engine, not an overhead cam engine. Just simple, cheap. Parts are everywhere. Then you got, Chevy LS trucks with the LS engine. And I'll go pre-2008, other than the 4.8. The 4.8 maintained its simplicity. It never went to the cylinder deactivation. In fact, you find people now, they didn't want the 4.8 because it made a little less power, didn't have as much torque. But now you find people looking for it because it's the simple engine, the one that just seems to keep running and never using oil, while the 5.3s, 2008 and beyond, turned into oil burners, had lifter problems. So the 4.8 is like the golden child, and you can get them even newer, and they're still simple. They came in some Suburbans, of which I knew one that had 320,000 miles on it. They came in the half-ton pickups. Great engines. And so were the other LS engines, the 5.3s and 6.0s, going back from 2008. Excellent, excellent engines. Some of the best. And simple and cheap and easy to work on. They are easier to work on than the Fords. There's just so much room in there. Tuning one up, changing an alternator, anything, doing any kind of work on one it's probably got to be one of the easiest vehicles to work on. I had a 2001 Silverado 3/4 ton, and hey, I couldn't believe how easy it was to work on. I know I bring up the same vehicles on a lot of these videos, but it just so happens these are the cheapest to own. I can't keep bringing them up. You know, the Hondas and Toyotas are great and long lasting, and they're not bad. They're not bad on upkeep. But I had a guy comment on a video the other day telling me about his Mercedes and how great it was, and he bought it with 200, and now it had 335. And I agreed with him. You know, he had an older one, and they're some of the best engineered, most reliable, over-engineered vehicles ever made. They're great, but they're not cheap to own. And he actually agreed with that. But yeah, they're some of the greatest vehicles out there. I tend to think as they go on and get newer and newer, which kind of goes for any of the vehicles nowadays. I brought that up with the Dodge, which actually was built on a Mercedes platform. The Chargers and Challengers and the Chrysler 300, all built on a Mercedes platform. Back when they were together there for a little bit, Chrysler and Mercedes. It's an old platform, but it is engineered by Mercedes. Anyway, these vehicles I mentioned are not the only ones that are cheap and easy. I would say, you know, Ford, Dodge, Chevy. That's another one I don't even have on my list. Is the Dodges with 318s and 360s. Simple, easy, cheap, get parts anywhere. But the common denominator is, amongst these that I've mentioned, is they made a lot of them. They made tons of them. And that's part of the reason stuff's so cheap for them. I mean, you can walk into any auto parts store and get just about anything at any given time. It'll be there in stock, and if it isn't in stock, it'll be there at 3:30 in the afternoon. I mean, and it won't cost much. That's 99.9% of the time the deal with these vehicles on this short list I gave you. Something to keep in mind when you're out there used car hunting. If you want to keep something long term and it's not going to cost you, these are good vehicles to look at. Anyway, I thought I'd get that out there on these. And by the way, I did end up selling the Scat Pack, mainly because I didn't want to deal with it out of warranty. Because in warranty, it was already looking like it was going to be in and out, and I didn't want to be in and out with that car out of warranty, because something like that, well, in a way, it's kind of like owning a high-end Euro car. It can just suck money out of your pocket constantly. And now I'm retired, and I don't need money getting sucked out of my pocket constantly. Hence the out with the new, in with the old. I'm following these rules myself. If I get something else performance oriented, it may be an old Corvette that's cheap, or maybe an old, Fox body Mustang, something, you can make those pretty fast. They're fun to drive as they are, but you can make them even faster, and you can do it without spending a ton of money. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you enjoy this content, and thanks for watching.